Hi, project and risk managers. Today, I'm going to dive into RAID. Don't worry, this RAID won't delete your files or trigger any alarms, unless, of course, you forget to manage your risks. RAID might sound a bit dramatic, but here it just stands for risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies. It is a very popular risk management method because it gives project teams a single structured view where they can log potential problems, risks, things they're counting on, which we call assumptions, current obstacles that can be called issues, and external factors that they rely on, which we can call dependencies. Today, we will look into how you can set up RAID in Jira with the help of the SoftComply Risk Manager Plus. But let's first start with an overview of what is RAID, who should do it, and when is it most beneficial to be conducted. RAID gives teams a very structured view of managing uncertainty. It is ideal as a daily operational tool for project managers. While more formal frameworks like ISO 31000, FMEA, NIST, and so on can run in parallel on enterprise or compliance level. So let's look into what these RAID items are. First of all, we have risks. These can be viewed as potential events that could negatively affect your project. This is the only RAID category that typically has a risk model tied to it. Assumptions are things that you as a project manager believe to be true, but have not yet confirmed. In the case where you go into validating the assumption, and if it proves wrong, you know that this assumption can trigger or increase the likelihood of a risk. Then we have issues. Issues, as the name says, are problems that are happening right now. Issues are active and must be driven to a resolution. And then we have dependencies, which very often are external events, resources, or deliverables that the project is relying on. Now, if a dependency that you identify becomes uncertain or slips, it often creates a new risk or an issue that can in turn escalate into a risk. So typical life cycle of a RAID in practice is the following. An assumption that turns out to be wrong or invalid becomes a risk, and the risk needs to be controlled by a mitigation action. Or you have a dependency that slips or is missed that can create an issue that in turn can escalate into a risk. So these are the two cornerstones of what happens in the RAID project. These transitions are much easier to manage if risks and dependencies are already full Jira issues. This we can jump into afterwards when we look into how you can set up RAID inside Jira. But let's first look into when is RAID most useful. So there are a couple of situations when RAID is particularly helpful. First, of course, when you start the project, so in the project initiation or planning phase, and there you can capture all the different risks, assumptions, issues, and dependencies that you can think of, giving your team a clear picture of what could possibly impact the scope, budget, or schedule of your project. Secondly, a cross-functional project to keep uncertainties visible across multiple teams. RAID categories make it easy to assign ownership and track who is managing which item. In high-risk and regulated projects, it's useful to run in parallel to risk management frameworks while giving a project manager a more operational or agile tool, while the bigger frameworks very often can slow down the teams. Rapidly changing environments, when requirements and resources are shifting very often, RAID ensures that you keep an eye on the assumptions and dependencies while you continuously validate them to make sure that issues that are escalating can be quickly dealt with. Of course, as any risk framework, there are also challenges with RAID. It is a simple concept. It's very easy to populate. Now, the thing that is hard is staying on top of RAID. Instead of having RAID as a static document that you fill once and leave to a spreadsheet view, it's not that helpful. As in any risk framework, of course, you have to keep it live. You have to keep it where the people are actually working, ideally integrating to tools that your teams are working or using. Another thing is all about the confusion with the RAID categories. People very often mix up the risks with issues and assumptions with dependencies. Another thing that very often happens is the lack of connection to an actual project plan. RAID items shouldn't be buried in static spreadsheets separate from actual project tasks and milestones. Very often we prioritize everything as the most critical. Therefore, we do not have an understanding of what is the more critical task and what should we deal with first. Priorities, and especially in risks, the risk scores come to play here. And no ownership. We have to put ownerships in place when we talk about risks and dependencies particularly. So let's see how we can deal with these challenges while we work inside Jira, and how you can work with the Risk Manager Plus app in Jira to conduct RAID. When you as a project manager want to manage your project risks, you can go and check out the SoftComply Risk Manager Plus app, which is one of the most configurable and advanced apps on Jira Cloud today. Once you have that installed, we can do the following things. So we have 4 RAID items that we need to keep track of. We have risks, we have assumptions, we have issues, and we have dependencies. Now, 2 of those 4 have their own lifecycle workflows, owners, milestones, review dates, and in case of a risk, it also has a risk model attached to it. So what we do in the setup is that we have 2 types of Jira issues that we identify, one as a risk and the other as a dependency. So to be able to see them in different dashboards, to be able to give them owners and due dates, review dates, whatnot. We then have 2 items, assumptions and issues, that are data sets related to risks and dependencies, but they do not have a workflow. So we define them as object registers. And object registers are basically data libraries inside the Risk Manager Plus, where you can describe data related to that particular data set. So in this case, when we look at assumptions, we can see that we have, for example, for this particular project, already identified 5 different assumptions. We have given each assumption a title, a short description of that assumption, and the validation plan. How do we validate it? The owner for each assumption, and also the status. So in here, we can say that either this assumption has not been validated yet, has been validated and it's okay, or this assumption is invalid, in which case an issue can rise from it that can result in a risk as well. So we have this object register, and we also have the issues object register. Both of these object registers are data sets that we can link to risks and dependencies in the Risk Manager Plus app that have their own set of data that we can describe here in the object register. With the risks, we always prepare a risk model. And in this particular case, we identified a 4x4 risk matrix, and it has impact and likelihood on the 2 different axes, and we can define the risk classes or the risk appetite in this heat map as we go. When we have set this up, we can jump into the risk table view. So this is the risk table view where we have brought out on 2 different sheets, risks on one sheet and dependencies on the other sheet. This is the way to stay on top of the risks and dependencies in real life. The risk categories that we have identified are budget, delays, goals, resources, and strategy alignment. So let's say that we have a software development project, and we assume in here that, for example, finance has approved the budget without having to decrease scope. The QA team will be available during the project when we need them. The stakeholders will not add any new requirements during development, that current developers will be allocated to this project until release, and that the project will stay on top of the strategic roadmap for the next quarter. So these are all assumptions. Now, they are all unvalidated, but if some of them are invalid, an issue could rise from there. A risk in this case, in terms of budget, would be that project could exceed an allocated budget. What it is that we do with this, we have a mitigation in place, we have to monitor the budget spend weekly. In terms of delays, key features may not be delivered on time. We have a mitigation plan there that we add early integration spikes, buffer sprints, frequent tracking. So everything to do with making sure that we are on track. We have the goals aligned, the project goals are clear and they are not changing. So all of this is, we can pull into one sheet. So we have the assumptions, we have the issues, we also have dependencies. Dependencies are things that our assumptions are relying on. For example, we are relying on, in terms of the budget, that the finance department has approved our project budget, that the QA team, in terms of resource, will be available for us, that the steering committee feedback is positive in terms of the project scope, that we have a backup contractor if we need them, and finally, that we have the executive sponsors backing and support for our project. each one of the risks, as well as each one of the dependencies, has their own owner. You can mark the priorities and, of course, add the due dates and the review dates as need be. So this, in short, is how you can manage your RAID in Jira. So first you create the issue types, then you create the risk model for risk issue type. You then build the assumptions and issues library in the object registers of the Risk Manager Plus app. And then in the risk table, you create two tabs, one for risks and the other for dependencies. You then assign relevant issue types for each tab, so they will automatically be populated in the correct tab. And then you can customize the columns of the table as you like. After that, you are all set up and you can start working with your assumptions and dependencies, link them to the risks that they influence, link issues to the risks that they are causing, link all RAID items to the project tasks and milestones that they impact. This makes RAID part of the actual delivery plan. So once again, an assumption, if proved wrong, can become a risk. A dependency that slips can create an issue that can escalate into a risk. Risks can be scored and prioritized to understand which risks need to be resolved first. This is how you can create your RAID risk management inside Jira. If you have any questions at all how to do it, they are most welcome to come and arrange a one-on-one with our team. Happy to walk you through setting up your first RAID project. Thanks for watching and good luck with your RAID. Bye-bye.